So as you might imagine, the primary goal of template strings is to avoid kind of ambiguity with really long strings that need to be computed together in some fashion. So let's look at a very practical example of this. I was recently working on a project where I was trying to figure out some way to post pictures automatically to an Instagram account. So Instagram does have an API available, but all the API operations that they have don't actually allow you to upload or post pictures. And if you're not familiar with Instagram, no problem. It's basically just, it is an image sharing service. So on a mobile device, you post up a picture and that's pretty much it. People can look at the picture and comment on it, all that kind of good stuff. So again, you cannot by default upload pictures programmatically to Instagram. I did, however, find a really interesting blog post from someone who wrote a script with PHP to programmatically upload posts. So they basically figured out a backdoor around it. And so I spent some time converting the PHP code over to equivalent JavaScript. And there was one line in particular that I'm going to post on here right now. And so here's the PHP line. So this is PHP right here. If you're not familiar with PHP, no problem. I'm really not either. I just basically knew enough to be able to convert the script. And so they're creating a variable right here of data, and they're assigning it this string, which has kind of looks like an object of sorts. So it's got a opening curly brace, a device ID, and then they join in a variable right here. So that's the dot right here that you see on either side of this device ID. This device ID right here is how they do string concatenation. They do it by using the dot right here. So let's do a little bit of a refactor, which is exactly what I did, to take this over to equivalent JavaScript code. So I'm going to first delete all these $signs because we don't use $signs for variables in JavaScript. And then instead of using the dot, we want to use a plus instead because that's how we do string concatenation. And so if I was doing just ES5 code, this is what I would end up with right here. And so when you look at this, my gosh, this is hideous. What is going on here, right? Like this really takes some looking at to figure out what's going on. Every single property and variable name is wrapped with a curly brace because this is supposed to be JSON. But then everything outside of it is wrapped with a single quote. So you see the single quotes, and then we've also got the double quotes inside. And so everything you see right here is incredibly tough to understand. It's really challenging to figure out what's going on. And in this string right here, I even actually deleted a couple other properties that were on the end just to make it fit on the screen for the purposes of this video. So I'm going to suggest that we try refactoring this over to using template strings and we see how much more legible it is. Okay, so that's going to be our goal. I also would like to make sure that we're actually doing it correctly here when we refactor it. So it looks like I do have a typo in here. I'll fix that up first if I can find it. Let's see, we got a opening and a closing, and then we add in the opening and closing. Opening and closing. It might be just that we don't have the variables declared. So let's say device ID is 5. We have a GUID of 20 and a username of hello. So it looks like we still got some other issue in here. What could it be? I really got to figure this stuff out ahead of time, don't I? Let's look at that error message again. I get the feeling that's over here towards the end. Let's take a look real quick. So I've got username. There it is right there. So there's one. Data is not defined. So we can say const data. And then we print out data and boom, there we go. So we finally got our string, which looks a little bit something like this. So this is the end goal that we're getting towards here. But definitely what we've got on the screen right now is pretty darn hard to understand what's going on. So let's do this refactor. Remember, the first thing that we do at all times is we replace our braces, or excuse me, our quotes with backticks. So we're going to do this entire statement with just one template string. So on the very far left-hand side, I'm going to put one backtick and then the other. And then inside, I will delete all of the single quotes that I have. Going through, like so. And then whenever I have a plus variable, I will replace it with a $sign and a curly brace. And then we'll do GUID, and finally my username as well. There we go. And unfortunately, I think I lost my right hand grip. So let me refresh the page. And okay, so we're 100% equivalent now. I've still got the same string on the, as a result here on the data variable. But you can see that the string as I'm producing right here is far more legible than what I had before. And I would argue that it's much more legible. So I can put in a lot more spaces in here if I so chose to just kind of clean up the legibility a little bit if I wanted to. So maybe I'll put in some spaces around some of the variables. And there we go. So much more very legible. I can figure out what's going on without having all those ugly plus symbols on the screen. So definitely whenever you're using strings where you have to mix in a ton of different variables, you need to be thinking about using template strings, okay? Cool, now there's one last thing that I want to point out to you around template strings. This is a little bit of a gotcha, something that I've done by mistake, and I'll be honest with you, I kind of got laughed at for it. I definitely got laughed at for this one. Always be kind of a little bit aware if you ever declare a variable something like, let's go back to year again, and you do something like the year, let's make this year message, and we'll say const year is 2016, and then our message will be the year is year, like so. Okay, so this right here, totally fine, right? We've got the year is blank, and that produces for us a string that says the year is 2016, exactly what we expect. So let's say now you come back to this code later on and you do a little bit of a refactor and you end up with someone telling you, hey Stephen, we don't really want to say the year is anymore. We just show us the year. Okay, so your message should be just the year. And so you might come back and do your refactor and end up with something like this. And so I just want to caution you, because I have made this mistake myself. If you end up with a template string that looks like this, where it's a template string and you've just got the JavaScript variable, you don't need a template string, just put the variable by itself. Totally the same thing. You don't need to wrap with a template string if it's just the variable. So again, just a little oopsie that I've definitely made one time that got me a lot of funny comments on a pull request on GitHub. So anyways, be aware of that little mistake. Okay, so with a better idea of template strings, let's move on to the next section and work on some exercises around it.